13 on your side. Breaking news now.
Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Elena Holland. We are interrupting our normal streaming programming for a special weather report. There is flooding all across the state and people are told to evacuate in some parts of Newaygo County. Now this comes as the Muskegon River water levels rises. Anyone south of the Croton Dam is being asked to evacuate as public safety workers are trying to clear that area. And we will, of course, be checking in with our teams live across the county with updates on the evacuation. But first, let's get on over to meteorologist Amber Twardy. She's going to give us a look at the current weather conditions. Amber, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Elena, we're still seeing a little bit of rain, a couple of thunderstorms across West Michigan, primarily south of I-96, which is good news considering that we've had most of our rain north of I-96 these past multiple days, and that has resulted in rising flood levels, especially out on the Muskegon River. So we've issued a 13 weather impact alert that is especially aided along by that evacuation order that was ordered for those that are along that Muskegon floodplain, Muskegon River floodplain, that is just downstream of the Croton Dam. So this is mainly going to be in effect for Friday into Saturday, and that's because that's when we're expecting a lot of these rivers to be reaching their crest. That will continue throughout much of the weekend. So flooding still in the forecast as we continue to see more rain by the time we hit Saturday. This is largely going to be an impact for the Muskegon River, but that's not the only spot that is seeing some of these flood alerts that we'll take a look at in just a second here. The phrase to really pay attention to is turn around, don't drown. You've heard us say it again and again every time there's flooding. This really is that phrase that comes up so often, and there's a reason for that. We have seen sinkholes popping up across West Michigan, and that becomes a situation where you simply don't know how deep the water is. You might be driving into floodwaters that you could think is a couple of inches deep, but it can be significantly deeper than that. We saw that car this morning that drove straight into a sinkhole in Newaygo County, and we still are going to be looking at the potential for maybe some roads to get washed out, maybe some more sinkholes because of the amount of flooding that we have seen and that will continue to see over the next couple of days. Here's a look at where some of our rivers stand right now, or rather some of our gauges along the Muskegon River stands right now. Bridgeton currently just over 17 feet, cresting closer to about 20 feet as we head into this weekend. Closer to Newaygo, right now over 16 feet, but expected to get above 18.5 feet. At the Croton Dam, they're not too far off from their crest right now. Crest expected to be at 12.8 feet, and at Everett, looking at a crest that will be exceeding 16 feet as we're heading into this weekend. So here's a look at all these flood alerts that are draped across West Michigan. Almost the entire state is seeing some variety of a flood alert, even this flash flood watch still that's in place for Oceana County. That is specifically as local officials continue to monitor the Hesperia Dam for the potential of failure there. Now, across the region, we're seeing flood watches. That's for pretty much everybody across West Michigan. Southwest Michigan starting to miss out on that, which is some good news. But then we're seeing a lot of these little light blue polygons as well. Those are river flood warnings. So highlighting a couple of those, looking at the White River downstream of the Hesperia Dam because of that potential for dam failure. As we're heading a little bit further south, Muskegon River, that's where we're really going to be keeping a close eye on from the Croton Dam all the way down towards Bridgeton. Now, looking further south of that, Rogue River near Rockford, down towards the Grand River, right around Comstock Park into downtown. That's where still another flood watch, or rather flood warning, has been put into effect, and that extends further south and further east for the Grand River and the Thornapple River too. Now that's because of all the rain we've seen over the past multiple days, but this is just looking at the past 24 hours, and look at some of these totals. They're really impressive. Already over an inch for Holland is what we've seen over the past 24 hours, and we're not done yet as we're still seeing some rain out and about, and even a couple of thunder showers still. Now it is very scattered. There are multiple areas that aren't seeing anything and haven't been seeing anything for a couple of hours now, but here's that line of still a few thunder showers, mainly moving through the Kalamazoo area at this point. This will continue to track further east, and we still are expecting a few more showers and thunder showers into this evening, but it does look like this is really going to be lightening up into tomorrow. Now this has left our temperatures pretty cool throughout much of today. We only topped out close to about 60 degrees this morning, stayed in the 50s throughout much of the day with that cooler air, gloomier skies sticking around, and that has left our temperatures only in the 50s at this point. 58 for Grand Rapids, up to 65 near Kalamazoo. Just generally seeing a lot of 50s, some lower to mid 60s as well, but it is mild, warmer than average compared to this time of year. But after we've had some 70s this week, it is on the cooler side comparatively. Now we do have warmer conditions into our Fridays. We're closing out this week. We will be seeing additional rainfall into the weekend, though, on Saturday, and that will likely make flooding worse. We're looking at into this weekend to be the time when a lot of our local rivers are cresting. Beyond that, that's going to be a fairly strong cold front, which cools us down significantly into the end of the weekend. Much cooler conditions that we can expect into our Sunday. I'll give you a closer look at our extended forecast coming up in just a bit.
All right, Amber, thank you. Well, now take a look at this drone video. This is of one of the affected areas of the Muskegon River. People living below the Croton Dam are now being told to leave that area, as you can see why here from this video. And 13 Your Side's Michael Martin is at the top of that dam right now with an update on this rapidly developing situation. Michael, what can you tell us?
Well, there is a lot of conversations happening on the ground here. A lot of people who want to see what it is that's happening at the Croton Dam just behind me, as you mentioned. So I'll step out of the way. Now, the interesting visual, we'll show you this in just a moment here, but it's on the other side of the Croton Dam. As we've been saying, the danger here, the potential for dangerous flooding is not here. It's not on the upper portion of the Croton Dam, but below it. That is where we saw that evacuation notice for going out this morning around 9 a.m. Those words from Newaygo County, evacuate now. They weren't mincing words. They want people to know if you are along the Muskegon River below the Croton Dam on the floodplains, you need to make plans to get out of here. If you are still here, they don't want you to believe that the Croton Dam is at danger of the infrastructure crumbling or breaking. That is not the situation we're dealing with at this point. There's no current threat to the dam. This is owned and operated by Consumers Energy. They have people on site monitoring the conditions of the dam. They've told us that if anything happens, if there's any need to provide an update on the status of the Croton Dam, they will do that. So we have every reason to believe right now that things are operating as they should. Now, the Croton Dam, the way that this works is, speaking very simply, they have 6 floodgates, gates on that dam that they can open up to allow water to pass through it. They've got 8 of them, and they have 6 of them open now. So, and again, we're going to show you this in a second. It is something to see that water going through those gates at such a force. A lot of people wanted to see what that looked like. Some people dealing with a much more difficult situation right now in their lives. But here's what we were able to experience with them.
A force of nature.
Yeah, force of nature.
A steady flow of onlookers at the Croton Dam Thursday afternoon.
This is definitely unusual.
Yes,
very unusual.
Very.
I was surprised to see this many people here.
While those living below the dam have been told to evacuate, officials say there is no threat to the integrity of the dam at this time. The talk of the area right now, what's going to happen at Croton Dam?
Oh, yeah.
Water levels continued to rise throughout the day.
Definitely higher than normal, yes.
Threatening homes situated along the Muskegon River.
It's not going to get lower anytime soon.
Prompting people like Leslie DeLotte, who owns Little Mitten Landscape, to offer their assistance.
Here we got some beds up on blocks for them. They're currently getting out a washer and dryer. They were able to help them get some stuff more up to the higher level.
Her team securing this waterfront home for the forthcoming floods, removing what they can.
Because you never know when you're going to need help. And honestly, doing the next right thing is the best thing you can do in life.
Just one of many neighbors trying to help those who need it right now.
It definitely takes a community, and they are coming together and they are getting it done.
So if you've already evacuated, it's for the best. If you don't know where to go, Newaygo County directing people to the Commission on Aging out in White Cloud. That is on Gibbs Street. You need to make sure, though, if you are on those floodplains below the Croton Dam along the Muskegon River, that you are making plans to get out of there, because as the situation gets worse, things can happen very quickly. And if you are staying, they've already said that emergency personnel, police, EMS workers are not going to risk themselves to go into those floodplains when it's dangerous for calls. So please, please make sure if you are in one of those areas that you are making plans to get out. But we will continue to monitor the situation around here and bring you updates when we can. But get online, make sure that you've got a plan when things go bad. For now, though, live in Newaygo County, Michael Martin, 13 on your side.
All right, Michael, thank you so much. And speaking of those who are living below the Croton Dam in that floodplain, that's where we find 13 on your side's Micah Cho. He's in that area where officials have urged people and businesses to evacuate. Micah, what do things look like there?
Well, we are in Twin Lake off of South Maple Island Road. We are at the Maple Island grocery store right now. I don't know if you would have seen this at our 12 o'clock hits earlier today. I do want to say, before we get to all of this water surrounding, Colin, I kind of want to show. So we have this debris right here. I took a picture on my phone when we first got here. This debris right here, that was the water line at 12 o'clock. So this is absolutely moved maybe 2 or 3 feet closer to the road here. Now let's kind of go back to Maple Island. When I got here at around noon, I went in and I talked with some of the store owners and the people that worked here, and they said they didn't really want to talk to us, but you know, they welcomed us to be on the property and take pictures. Well, there was no water inside of the store. I don't know what that looks like right now, if that has changed, if maybe there was a breach in the foundation, but you could see they were evacuating. They even backed this high-low up here to make sure that nobody can go in while they're gone. Colin, I do want to go a little bit more this way and show, so we are about 150 yards away from the Muskegon River. The Muskegon River is over by that way. You can see another house just behind the Maple Island grocery store here that is underwater. I am curious to see if you can kind of see, maybe it looks like a little bit of like a window over there on their foundation to their basement. I am curious to see if curious to know if there is any water in their basement. But kind of just taking a little bit more of a walk down this way. We can see some cars in the driveways. There's a boat right there. We have some campers over here. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of these houses, their front yards, and including the yards, are just absolutely flooded. I mean, we're probably, I want to say this is maybe 10, 12 feet away from the water approaching the road. Now, earlier today when we were driving down here, we were coming from the north. We were going down South Franklin Road, and there was about 2 spots that were lined up with the Muskegon River where there was water over the roads. I am curious to know how much worse that has gotten. But again, about 150 yards, maybe 20 feet away from the road. We'll make sure to keep eyes on this for now. In Twin Lake, I'm Micah Cho for 13 on your side.
All right, Micah, thank you. And we want to get on over to meteorologist Amber Torti, because Amber, there is still some current weather situation happening that you need to tell us about right now.
Yeah, we've still got some stuff to talk about. We have a couple of thunderstorms down near I-94, especially around the Kalamazoo area. So a severe thunderstorm warning has popped up right around Kalamazoo. If we can get a look at that warning, that's going to be lasting until 4:45. This includes areas such as Comstock, Kalamazoo, Portage, Galesburg, Vicksburg. In this area already, there have been some reports of dime to nickel-sized hail. Now, there's the potential for this thunderstorm to produce up to 1 inch of hail in diameter, and also maximum wind speeds up to 60 miles an hour. The airport down in Kalamazoo has already reported peak wind gusts up to 45 miles an hour. So there have definitely already been some impacts out of this storm. Let's get a closer look at our hail product just to see what we can observe that inside the storm, there's definitely that potential for some hail to form. Up to 1 inch is what this current warning is showing. And then we can take a closer look at rotation, because we want to get a look at this too. It does look like we've got some of the green and red next to each other, but I don't see a lot of rotation. Looks pretty broad at this point, so we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. But we do want to make sure that we're really highlighting where this warning is and to make sure that everybody is updated in this area, because if you are in Galesburg, anywhere really east of Kalamazoo, between Kalamazoo and Battle Creek, that's where we are seeing this storm currently, and that is where you want to make sure that you are getting to your basement. So this warning will be staying in effect for the next about 30 minutes or so. At this point, it is traveling primarily to the east, and it's doing so at about 30 miles an hour. So there is that potential for hail that could be up to 1/4 in diameter, not 1/4 inch to 1 inch in diameter, but the size of a quarter, like the coin. I want to put a track on this to just show you how quickly it's traveling and where it's going to be arriving to your neighborhood pretty soon here. So right now it's moving close to about 30 miles an hour, mainly to the east, but a little bit of an east-northeasterly direction. So if you're in climax, that'll be closer to about 4:21. So just about 6 minutes from now is when that storm will be arriving to your doorstep. Battle Creek, that'll be closer to about 4:30. Brownlee Park, 4:38. Marshall Township, closer to 4:53. Now a little bit past 5 o'clock is when that would get closer to Newaygo Township. So this will continue to track further east into Calhoun County not too long from now, but right now it is still only in Kalamazoo County. So at this point, hail does look to be the main concern from this storm specifically. We're seeing some pretty heavy rain out of it as well, which we know, of course, is not great considering how much rain we've had recently. There are also some flood alerts that are going on down near Vicksburg along the Portage River. But at this point, it does look like a lot of that rain is further north of that area. So that's definitely some good news for folks down there. Now, still, we are looking at the potential for some hail that could be meeting severe criteria at this point. Nickel and dime-sized hail is what we have seen so far, what we've seen some reports of at very least, with a maximum wind gust reported up to 45 miles an hour at the Kalamazoo Airport. So it's heading to the east once again. This is going to be impacting areas that are east of Kalamazoo, mainly getting towards the Battle Creek area. So this will be arriving to your doorstep within the next about 30 minutes or so. As it continues to track further east, and once it leaves our area, thankfully, we are going to be looking at a much quieter evening ahead of us. So once a lot of this does clear out, we're not looking at a lot going on behind it, but still, we don't want to forget about that severe thunderstorm warning that we're seeing in Kalamazoo County at this point either. So this is going to be important to pay attention to near I-94 specifically. That is where we're seeing this warning in effect currently. So looking at multiple people that would be affected by this, there are some more populated areas through this region. Just to the south of Gull Lake, it looks like it's going to be missing Gull Lake just by a little bit. And then off to the east, Battle Creek, Sunrise Heights, likely to even travel over towards Marshall. Those are going to be the areas where you want to make sure that you're paying attention to this storm as it's heading in your direction, because as it does arrive, we're looking at hail that's big enough that you want to make sure that you are not outdoors. You might want to get to your safe spot, especially with winds that are on the stronger side. Once again, getting to Battle Creek closer to about 4:30, Marshall just shy of 5 o'clock, and it will continue its track further eastward. So if you're in any of those spots where this storm is about 10-15 minutes away, I'm going to give you the go-ahead. You can pull your car into your garage if you're able to do that pretty quickly. But if this storm is right on your doorstep, rather, you want to just make sure that you're staying inside and out of the storm entirely. This is going to carry some pretty strong winds. We are seeing still the concern for possibly a couple of thunderstorms that could be a bit stronger out of this. Really, just this one thunderstorm mainly is what we'll be tracking as we head into this evening. But even then, not a huge amount of concern at this time when we're talking about this storm. I'll throw up our hail product again because that really does look to be our main concern. It looks like we've got a little bit of a hail core now just east of Galesburg and just north of Climax. Once again, that's going to continue traveling east, and with the exact direction that it's heading in, it does look like it could be arriving to the Battle Creek area. So we'll put another track on specifically the hail core just to look at when it's going to be arriving to you. So Battle Creek closer to about 4:30, 4:35-ish. So you have just about 10, 20-ish minutes from now, I would say, before it's going to be arriving to you. So I would definitely say that you want to make sure you have that severe weather plan in place, being very cautious with the severe thunderstorm warning. And of course, we'll continue to track this for you. One last thing before we can turn things back to what we've been looking at, I do want to show you some velocity because it looks like we have a little bit of broad rotation. Right now, this isn't necessarily standing out to me very dramatically, I would say, but hey, there is a little bit of broad rotation. So this is something that we will be keeping a very close eye on, as well as the folks at the National Weather Service. They were the ones that issued that warning, of course, and we will be keeping a very close eye as well and keeping you updated if there's any more information that we need to share with you. Back to you, Elena.
Amber, thank you. A lot of information there, a lot happening today. And as the evacuation continues in Newaygo County, many of you are sending photos of the flooding right here to us at 13 on Your Side. These are some of your photos and video showing off the extent of the flooding, with water flooding into homes and completely submerging lawns. Don't forget, you can send in any photos to our newsroom using the number on your screen. And remember, if you come across flooding, do not try to drive through flooded areas. It only takes a foot of flowing water to carry a small car off the road. Also, don't try to walk in any floodwaters. Move to higher ground where and whenever possible. And if you do get caught, leave your car and get to safety. And take a look at this. This also happened today in Newaygo County. A massive sinkhole swallowed a car overnight in Fremont. This was first reported around 4 this morning, but officials say it likely formed sometime earlier. The hole opened along South Parsons Avenue near West North River Drive. Yeah, look at this. Photos show the vehicle nose down into the hole. There's even water rushing beneath it before crews were able to pull it out. The driver was not hurt. There's that photo right there of the vehicle being pulled out of the sinkhole. At this time, the road remains closed as crews work to repair that damage. This is the latest in a string of sinkholes and road washouts all across West Michigan as the flooding does continue, with some of the rivers expected to reach near historic levels by the weekend. And our meteorologists have been talking about the potential for river levels to break records at some gauges over the next few days. But some of you have been asking, what about that great flood of 1986? Meteorologist Amber Tuardi is back to talk more about that historic event and how this flooding compares. So Amber, how does it?
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of comments kind of asking about, hey, what about the flood of 1986? A lot of people have that strong in their memories, and there's a good reason for it. There was a lot of rain that came down in a very short period of time, resulting in so much flooding that 14 small dams actually had failures. And then also there were definitely a lot of areas that were inundated because of that flood. And there were even some fatalities out of this deadly storm. So here's a look at some of the video that was taken back in 1986. Yeah, definitely a lot of floodwaters. You can see some of those sandbags piled up. This is a video along the Muskegon River at the Hardy Dam. Look at how that's just overflowing the dam entirely. Now, thankfully, Hardy Dam, Croton Dam, neither of those had failures, but the Hart Dam over in Petwater did have a failure, and so did the Comstock, or rather the Cortland Dam that was in Rockford and was not rebuilt. So here's a couple of more videos of what we saw out of that storm. This was significant and, of course, very rich in people's memories that did have to experience it, especially north of I-96. That's where things were the absolute worst. So if we can turn things over and look at some of those totals that we experienced from this. This was provided by the National Weather Service in Detroit. It did look like there were multiple areas at least that saw several inches of rainfall over a 3-day span. Big Rapids, over a foot of rain in just 3 days. So we've been talking about several inches over the past couple of days here and more recently, but it's still only been about 4 or 5 inches or so, a little bit more than that in some spots, but talking about over a foot of rainfall in just 3 days is very significant. About a 60-mile stretch from west to east of just how much we saw that really significant flood back in 1986. This happened in September, so unfortunately, that really had a strong impact on crops. A little bit further south, things weren't as bad. Over that 3-day span, saw less than an inch closer to the Kalamazoo area and over just east, or rather just north of Ann Arbor, just north and west of Ann Arbor, really. But the areas that saw the most of that rainfall and unfortunately the worst flooding also had to experience some pretty significant impacts. 30 counties were affected by this historic flood. There was $500 million estimated in damages, mainly to crops. And I did a little bit of math, and it looks like that's close to and even slightly over $1.5 billion in today's dollars. Now, on top of that, there were also 10 deaths statewide, and hundreds were injured because of this storm. So I want to give you a look at what we're seeing at the Croton Dam now versus what we saw back in 1986. The record was set at 16.8 feet. Once again, back in 1986, we're expected to get closer to 12.8 feet as we're heading into early tomorrow morning. So that's quite a bit a ways off from the Croton Dam. But the reason I want to show you that first is because that is one area where that record does reflect data back into the 80s. Not all river gauges do show that, though. So here's a look at what we're seeing from the Muskegon River at Newaygo. Now, the record was set at 15.1 feet. but we are now already past that. Now, the reason that that record is so low is not because they did not see significant flooding from that 80s flood, but instead because that gauge simply wasn't there at the time, so it was not able to collect that data. So technically, we are going to be breaking some records for Newaygo, Bridgeton along the Muskegon River. That's also the case here for what we're seeing for Bridgeton. That previous record set at 16.8 feet, we're already past that and expected to hit 20 feet heading into this weekend. Now, I want to give you a look at what we're seeing across West Michigan, the Lower Peninsula in general, and why we are seeing so many more data points along our rivers across the region now versus what we saw multiple years ago. So back in 1987, it was reported that there were only 136 gauges statewide. Now we have 206. So plenty more gauges, plenty more data plots to be able to actually show how high the rivers were, just how strong that flooding was and how impactful it was. The impacts alone really just tell us how strong it was, including a lot of the pictures and videos that we've seen from it. But there is the reason why still we're talking about some gauges setting new records, because they simply don't have data that goes all the way back into the 80s. Now, still, we are going to be experiencing multiple spots that have flood alerts out for them. So the White River, downstream from the Hesperia Dam, currently still seeing not just a river flood warning, but also a flash flood watch for the entire county of Oceana County. So the reason for that is because of the potential for dam failure here. Now, that has not happened yet, but of course we'll be keeping a close eye on that for you. That's not the only area where we are seeing these flood alerts, though. All of West Michigan under a flood watch until early tomorrow morning. Flood warnings through northern Michigan. That's another spot that you've likely been hearing a lot about and seeing some pictures from. Plenty of flooding in downtown Traverse City, and also, of course, talking about that potential for dam failure and even an evacuation notice up towards Sheboygan. So there's a lot of those light blue polygons too. Those are the river flood warnings that we've been talking about. So if you are going to be heading out, you want to make sure that you are staying far away from floodwaters. It does not take a lot to actually get floated away. So if you are in most cars, it only takes 1 foot of water to float away a car, and it only takes 2 feet of water for SUVs and trucks. Just don't drive around any of those barricades. Make sure to respect those and stay far away. So right now, seeing some pretty gloomy conditions and also still a little bit of rainfall, not as much as what we saw from this morning, though. We do have a couple of thunderstorms still down near Kalamazoo. Give you a little bit of a closer look at that storm that we were tracking a severe thunderstorm warning from. And it looks like that's likely expired because no longer is the polygon showing up. So we are still seeing some pretty gusty winds out of that, possibly even some small hail does look to still be possible. So you want to make sure that you're very careful in those areas, especially towards and east of Battle Creek. This will continue to make its way further east, clearing the region into tonight. And we actually have much quieter conditions as we're heading into tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of a quieter Friday ahead of us. It does start cloudy, but looks like we could see a little bit of sunshine into the afternoon. We're not done yet, though. Friday night, we have the return of thunderstorms. Check this out, too. We could be seeing this line of thunderstorms roll through, potentially on the stronger side, as this is going to be along a cold front. So that cold front is providing a lot of lift. That's going to be on top of temperatures from our Friday that will be reaching into the mid-70s. And also, with that sunshine, that can destabilize our atmosphere a bit too. Now, the timing of this, not exactly conducive for severe weather, but we still can't rule it out. So this will continue to move out. 4 a.m., we're still left with some rain, especially south of I-96, south of Grand Rapids, but this will continue to move out as well. So into our Saturday morning, looking a lot quieter, maybe even a bit of sun by the afternoon. Not before it drops a good amount of rain first, though. Between now and Saturday afternoon, we could be seeing upwards of an inch in some spots that get those heaviest downpours, mainly because of those storms that we're expecting Friday night into early Saturday morning. They don't last all Saturday long, but while they're here, they're going to be dumping a good deal of rainfall. Even some models suggesting that areas like Fremont getting up into Newaygo and Oceana County possibly exceeding an inch by quite a bit. So the Storm Prediction Center has placed much of West Michigan under a 1 out of 5 risk, but then look at this 2 out of 5 risk we're seeing along Muskegon, extending further south through Holland. It's mainly confined to southwest Michigan, but it does inch up along the lakeshore. That's going to be as that line is moving through, with the cold front making its way through the Midwest. This extends as far inland as Kalamazoo down into southwest Michigan and continues off in that direction. The greatest threat will be off to our west. So that's going to be where timing is actually more favorable for severe weather to develop, but we can't rule out the potential for some of those storms to maintain their strength as they make their way into West Michigan. So So here's what we're looking at over the next couple of days. Partly cloudy skies with temperatures in the mid-70s for Friday. We are seeing that chance for night storms. We are going to see those moving in after dark, well after dark, and continue with us after midnight into early Saturday morning. Now, still the reason that we have Saturday highlighted in red, not necessarily because of the storms. We issued this instead because of the flooding that we are experiencing heading into this weekend and that many areas are already dealing with right now. As we head into the end of the weekend, quieter but much colder as temperatures will only be in the mid-40s into our Sunday afternoon. A lot cooler there. That's going to be after we see a decent amount of rainfall for our Saturday, especially into Saturday morning. Next week, though, finally, we're starting to see a little bit of relief. It doesn't look like we're going to get more than maybe a couple hundredths of an inch here or there, but for the most part, next week is finally looking to be a little bit calmer for us. As far as temperatures go, dropping down, yes, into the 40s by Sunday, but returning to more seasonable and even slightly warmer than average values into next week. We've got 60s back in the forecast, so we do have still more comfortable temperatures back on their way. Just have to deal with a little bit of a cool down there for Sunday first. As far as what we can expect beyond that, your 13 on your side, 7-day forecast. Thursday no longer in the picture. We're basically done with that. But as we're heading into tomorrow, partly cloudy, temperatures in the 70s. Saturday highlighted in red for the potential, really the likelihood of river flooding that could be historic for some river gauges. Beyond that, much cooler but quieter into Sunday. Next week, finally looking quieter and still fairly comfortable too.
All right, Amber, thank you so much for all that information. And as we've been talking about all day long, early this morning, people living south of the Croton Dam in that area of the Muskegon River were told to evacuate because of that flooding. We find 13 on your side's Michael Martin at the top of that dam right now with an update on this rapidly developing situation. Michael, what can you tell us that's happening right now?
Well, Elena, a lot of what we've seen throughout the day, it's a lot of nothing from some vantage points, but we are monitoring it because the reality of this situation, as we think we've all said over and over again, is that when it gets bad, it's going to get bad fast. So right now, like you mentioned, we are at the top of the Croton Dam on the Muskegon River in Newaygo County. The concern, as we've been mentioning again, is for the folks that are below the Croton Dam, along the Muskegon River, below the Croton Dam on those floodplains. That is the area where the potential for severe flooding is very real. And as we traveled around the area today, we saw several homes, and there are a lot that have already started to see floodwaters ease up towards their property and into their homes. We spoke to one family today that the water was, I would say, 4 inches from their back sliding door. Their garden in the back behind their home already under the water. You could see the flowers that had just come up days ago underwater. It is unreal, some of those things, what they're dealing with, and they've having to move quickly. So luckily, this family that we spoke to, they had some helpers, some people from the area that were willing to step in and lend a hand.
So right now we're helping out a couple here. They're just south of the Croton Dam, and we're helping them get their stuff higher up off the ground, getting what they need to out. We got a couple trucks and trailers here because you never know when you're going to need help. And honestly, doing the next right thing is the best thing you can do in life.
So looking at this side of the Croton Dam, speaking very generally, the way that this is set up is that there are 8 gates that they can lower and rise to keep the water up here or let it go. And at this point, of the 8 gates that they have available to them, they've got 6 of them opening up and have that water rushing through. So the water coming through is to make sure that the water levels up here don't rise, but of course the concern is below the Croton Dam. So we have had people coming, stopping on that bridge just above the dam and the areas immediately around it all day, trying to get a look at what it looks like today, because they say, almost everyone I spoke to says they've never seen the dam with 6 gates open. They see the typical 1 or 2 gates open, but with 6, that water is really flowing. We had several people use the same descriptor. It's like a force of nature watching it blast through there. And it really is something. So we have plenty of photos and videos that we've put together on our website of what that looks like. But while it is a spectacle for the people stopping here, again, there's a lot of people that are dealing with a much different reality, a much tougher day and days ahead of them as we look forward to the potential for more rain coming down, more weather. And we're going to keep watching those water levels here and the conditions below the Croton Dam as well. So for now, live in Newaygo County, Michael Martin, I'll send it back to you.
Michael, thank you so much for that report. And of course, we're going to have a lot more on this throughout the next half hour as we keep an eye on the floodwaters near the Croton Dam and talk to one of our reporters, Micah, who's out south of the dam, talking to those folks there who had to evacuate. And we'll also get an update on the current conditions of the weather that's happening today still. We'll have all that when we come back in just a few minutes. Once again, thanks so much for joining us for this special edition of our newscast here on 13 Plus as we're keeping an eye on the flooding and updating you about the evacuation notice in Newaygo County. And that's where we find Third Tenure Sides Micah Cho. He is south of the Croton Dam area. That is where officials have urged people to evacuate because of those rising flood levels. Let's get right on over to Micah. What can you tell us and what do you see out there?
Yeah, so we're off South Maple Island Road, kind of in the Twin Lake area, and right over here to the side of me is the Maple Island grocery store. Now, we came here around 12 o'clock today. There was no water in the stores when I went and I talked to some of the people that were working here. So we don't know what that looks like right now on the inside of it. But obviously, as you can see, the entire store is surrounded by water. Now, I did some measuring off of Google Earth, so my calculations might be a little off, but it looks like from the bank of the river over there, of the Muskegon River, to the road is about 145 yards. So, Colin, I don't know if you can kind of focus in on that red board there with those, looks like 2 poles. Now, that is the riverbank. That red board there is some sort of sign that says this is the Maple Island grocery store, according to some neighbors that we talked to, so that tubers, kayakers, they know that where they are, so they can kind of come out and do some shopping at the grocery store here. So that just kind of shows you the depth, or just how much water has been coming off of the river. Now, the entire side of this road here, we have front yards, we have backyards flooded. I don't know if you saw when we were pointing over the river, there was that house over there, or that structure there too. Looks like most of that foundation is underwater. I'm curious to see if there's any water in their basements there. But we've been seeing people evacuate throughout the entire day. We even talked to a gentleman who he bought a kayak recently, so that if he does have to get to his home, right now it's not underwater, but if it does get underwater, he can come and go as needed. But as I was saying, this entire side of the road is covered in water. The other side is not. That's where that gentleman lives, maybe a half mile away. We also talked to his neighbor earlier today. Here's some of what they have to say about how their homes are doing on the other side of the road.
Just got to get organized. You know, it happened so fast. This happened in 2014, and when it did, we had a little more time. We had about 3-4 days. We got about 24 hours this time, and we're already 12 into it. You know, so it's just like we're going to see how this accumulates.
Now, we saw the Maple Island grocery store. I wanted to show these houses over here to the side of it real quick before we go. The entire front yards over here and the backyards, obviously, these are all covered in water. I'm curious to know how deep it is. And then down here as well, there's that bridge over to the right as you are going down the road. That also travels along the Muskegon River. There's about 2 spots over there where water has been starting to encroach on the roads. You'll see if you come down this way, you'll see that there are road closed signs because of that. And there are more roads that are starting to have the water encroach on them as well. And we'll continue to keep our eyes on this. For now in Twin Lake, I'm Micah Cho for 13 on your side.
Micah, thank you so much for that look, and especially that sign showing where the riverbank was supposed to be. That's incredible. Well, speaking of photos and images, as this evacuation continues, many of you are sending us photos and video of the flooding to us here at 13 Your Side. Here are just some of those showing the extent of the flooding, with the water flooding into homes, completely submerging lawns in some cases. And don't forget, you can send any photos that you have or videos into our newsroom using that number on your screen, 616-559-1310. And of course, don't forget this either. Remember, if you come across flooding, do not try to drive through it. It only takes a foot of flowing water to carry a small car off the road. And of course, don't try to walk in any floodwaters. Move to higher ground where and whenever possible. If you do get caught, leave your car and get to safety. But take a look at this now. This also happened in Newaygo County today. A massive sinkhole swallowed a car overnight in Fremont. It was first reported around 4 this morning, but officials say it likely formed sometime earlier. Now, the hole opened along South Parsons Avenue near West North River Drive. And we have photos that show the vehicle nose down into the hole with the water rushing beneath it. And that was before crews were able to pull it out. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Here's a look at that right now of that vehicle being pulled out by Jerry's Towing. The road remains closed at latest check as crews work to repair that damage to the road. This is just the latest in a string of sinkholes and road washouts all across West Michigan as flooding continues, with some rivers expected to reach near historic levels by the weekend. And of course, businesses and organizations in Newaygo County and surrounding areas are opening up as emergency shelters for those who have to evacuate. The Fremont Community Rec Center is open on East Maple Street. Inspire Church on Garden Street in Fremont also open as an emergency shelter. Also, we have one in Holland, the Country Inn, offering rooms at a discounted rate for those who just need a place to stay. And our meteorologists have been talking about the potential for river levels to break records at some gauges over the next few days. But some of you have been even asking about that Great Flood of 1986. Meteorologist Amber Tord is here to talk about that historic event and how it compares to now.
Yeah, so we have definitely seen a lot of people asking about the Great Flood of 1986. Now, some of you might even remember it, and you do? Well, it's because it really stands out in the memory. There was a lot of flooding across West Michigan, especially north of I-96. Muskegon River saw some really elevated levels. Now, thankfully, we are not going to be close to that this weekend. We still do have some river gauges that could be reaching new records, but that is strictly because those river gauges have been put in within the past about 10 to 20 years, and they don't include data from the 80s. So that's your explanation as to why. Here's a couple of videos from what we saw back in the 80s. September of 1986, that's when this all happened. And there's sandbags. This is a video of a car driving through floodwaters overtaking the Hardy Dam. So that's the Muskegon River. Very elevated levels, multiple areas that have still touched records that we are not going to be even getting close to this weekend. Still multiple feet off, especially when we're talking about the Croton Dam. We are expecting to still be a couple feet off from the record that was set back in 1986, but that does not mean that we're not seeing significant flooding, major flooding even, with some pretty high impacts expected. So as far as what we're expecting this weekend, yes, elevated flood levels and also additional rainfall. That's in addition to what we're seeing right now. We have some thunderstorms still south of I-96, south of Grand Rapids, now to the east of Kalamazoo. Now this storm specifically, we've been keeping an eye on it, had a severe thunderstorm warning not too long ago. That has expired. That actually expired early, but a special weather statement has been continued into much of Calhoun County for the potential of hail that could be up to 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Already the storm has produced nickel and dime size hail. Also winds that could be pretty strong out of this. We could be seeing wind gusts up to about 40 miles an hour. Kalamazoo Airport itself reported a wind gust of 45 miles an hour. So for Calhoun County, this is going to be including cities like Albion. It's currently over Battle Creek, but will continue to track east into Marshall not too long from right now. So Marshall, you've only got about 2-3 minutes before this arrives to your doorstep. Closer to Concha, getting right around 5 o'clock is when you'll see that arriving. And then Albion, closer to about 5:10, just shy of that is when you're going to start to see those storms arriving to your neighborhood as well. So let's get a closer look at the hail core. It has lightened up a lot. So we saw a pretty strong hail core as it made its way through the Kalamazoo area and extended a little bit further off to the east. With that being said, thankfully, it does look to be a lot weaker at this point. I'm going to kind of turn this back and just show you what it's looked like over the past 30 minutes. Look at how much stronger it was, even just at 4:30. Now, we are already seeing a lot of things weakening, but good thing, because this storm definitely produced some more severe impacts. The potential for hail, once again, dime to nickel size is what was reported so far at very least, but thankfully, yes, we are starting to see much quieter conditions as the storm looks to be ramping down. A closer look, or rather a grander look at what we're seeing at this point across West Michigan. It really is that one line that's making its way now east of Kalamazoo, through the Battle Creek area and over towards Lansing. That has now started to move its way on out. So here's what we're seeing at this point. Drier conditions by about 7 o'clock and even drier overnight as we continue to see any lingering showers wrapping up entirely, leaving us with drier conditions into Friday. Friday is partly cloudy, temperatures that will be topping out in the mid-70s. Beyond that, though, we are looking at cooler conditions into the weekend with additional rain chances. Saturday, looking at some thunderstorms in the morning, some that could be on the stronger side. We are looking at now a risk from the Storm Prediction Center. We'll look at that in just a moment here. But by the afternoon, we've got some sunshine on the way. Cooler conditions already. Those will only be in the 60s for Saturday and then only in the 40s by the time that we hit Sunday. It is quieter to close out the weekend, but we are also going to be seeing those much colder temperatures. So here's what we're talking about on Saturday. That threat from the Storm Prediction Center, a 2 out of 5 threat for much of southwest Michigan. This goes from right along the lakeshore, closer to Muskegon, down through Holland and extending over towards Kalamazoo. So southwest Michigan is where we're going to be seeing the greatest threat, but notice how we're seeing an even greater threat off to our west. that is going to be where those storms are developing. That's where there is a 3 out of 5 or enhanced risk for strong to severe thunderstorms over in that direction. So talking about Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, we'll have to watch as those storms develop in that region and continue to track in our direction. But once again, those will be arriving overnight. I do think that a lot of those storms will lose their energy by the time that they arrive, but if they maintain some of that energy, then yes, we could end up seeing a couple of impacts, possibly some stronger winds, hail, also a possibility. We'll be keeping a very close eye on that thunderstorm. So as far as what we're seeing from flood outlook, because that has been something we've talked about for multiple days and for a good reason. Northern Michigan will be seeing the worst of it occurring, flooding right now. We've been hearing about it for days now, closer to Traverse City and also the Sheboygan area where they were seeing some levee failures up in that direction. Still likely flooding over the next 5 days for much of West Michigan. The worst impacts will be a little bit further north, closer to Big Rapids and north of that. Really, as you're getting along the Muskegon River is where we're going to be seeing the greatest flooding with swelling rivers already. And that is going to be alongside a lot of flood alerts that are in place across the region. Flood watches that is in place at least across all of West Michigan, and then also some flood warnings off to our north. This flood watch currently expires Friday at 2 a.m., so very early morning tomorrow. But even beyond that, we still have additional rain chances into the weekend. So here's what we're looking at in terms of our rain chances. Saturday, yes, especially in the morning, will bring us some greater rainfall, which is going to be making flooding matters even worse. But next week, finally, we start to see a little bit of relief. Now, that system on Saturday will cool us down significantly, only in the 40s for our Sunday. But beyond that, we start to warm up again, back in the 50s by Monday. And then by the time we're getting into next week, we are looking at 60s again, so we'll actually be a little bit above average. Now, thankfully, during that time frame, it looks like we're going to be a little bit drier, which is definitely some good news considering just how much rain we've been seeing recently. Now, things are trying to load here, but over the past about 48 hours, there we go. We have seen some pretty significant totals, over 2 inches for much of West Michigan, really. Now, keeping in mind that we still have more rain on the way, maybe a little bit tonight. I really don't anticipate much out of the storms that are continuing to make their way out of the region as they're moving at about 40 miles an hour, so moving relatively quickly, trying to get out of here. By the time that we hit this weekend, though, Saturday brings those additional rain chances. So flood watch, that's all across West Michigan. A lot of those flood warnings, river flood warnings, that are going to be in place for many of our rivers. So at this point, we still are going to be tracking multiple regions where we are expecting to see some of these flood alerts in place. River flood warning for the White River downstream from the Hesperia Dam. We've talked about this for a couple of days, especially yesterday is when this really picked up, where local officials were talking about the potential for failure at the Hesperia Dam. Now, right now, still not a failure, but at this point, we still are going to be watching that, which is also why a flash flood watch is in place for all of Oceana County. So that's one of our river flood warnings, but another one a little bit further south for the Muskegon River in southern Newaygo County. This is where we have a river flood warning that lasts through Saturday, all day Saturday, as we continue to see more rain, more thunderstorms in the forecast that will be adding to the totals of what we've seen in terms of rainfall and also adding to river levels too. So let's talk about some of these river levels. Right at the Croton Dam. Right now, just shy of 2.3 feet. So already at elevated levels, already considered to be in the major flooding stage. Expected to get a little bit higher from here into tomorrow morning. Still starting to go down as we're heading into this weekend, it looks like. But even then, it's a very gradual drop as we look ahead into next week with still moderate flooding expected, likely through the weekend. So the Croton Dam, that is going to be far from the record that was set back in 1986 from the Great Flood that a lot of you have been commenting about, kind of telling us a little bit more about. And yes, that is still something that we are not going to be approaching. We are still more than 4 feet, or really actually just about 4 feet away from the record is what we're expecting as we are reaching crest. Now, with that being said, there are a couple of records that we technically will be beating. Now, the reasoning for that is because there are a couple of river gauges that weren't put in until the past about 10 to 20 years. So the records that were previously held were not because of data that was set back in the 80s. It's more so because of data that's been set within the 2010s, 2020s, but still we have set some new records and some pretty decent ones too. The previous record for the Muskegon River at Newaygo was 15.1 feet. We have already exceeded that. Now it's 16.27, and we expect to get above 18.5 feet into this weekend. Also into this weekend for the Muskegon River at Bridgeton, that previous record, 16.8 feet. We've already exceeded it, and we're going to get closer to the 20-foot mark once the Muskegon River at Bridgeton reaches its crest. So that's not the only area that we're seeing some of these river alerts in place. Also tracking a little bit further south, the Rogue River, another spot where we're seeing some of these river flood warnings down through the Grand River and extending over into the Thornapple River as well. So here's what we're seeing from the Grand River at Comstock Park. This will be cresting instead into next week, it looks like. That will be getting back into major flood stage, but also still going to be staying away from the record of 17.8 feet. Here's what we're seeing from the Grand Rapids site of the Grand River. This will be on the rise too over the next multiple days. Getting into the beginning of next week, expecting to get into the minor flood stage, but still 19 feet is what we're going to be seeing. So that's still going to be noticeable, especially to those of you that usually spend a lot of time downtown. So we are anticipating still heightened rivers over the next multiple days. That's why we have so many of these flood alerts in place, and that's going to be alongside more of those rain chances into the weekend. Saturday especially bringing the chance for thunderstorms, some of which could be on the stronger side. So we are still going to be tracking that as we head into these next couple of days, which still will make it, unfortunately, possible that we could see flooding. Really likely that we're going to be seeing flooding along rivers. Now, especially we'll be keeping a close eye on some of these dams that we've been talking about. The good news, though, even though there